Okay, so here is the interesting uh, thing. So if you look at let me just go to this picture first. So if you look at the seven perceptual processes that we've discussed so far, we started with the external. Let's stick to vision. Okay, so we talked about external digital stimulus, then proximal stimulus, then receptor processes, and then neural processes, then perception, recognition, then taking action, which we'll talk about soon. If you notice, there is one thing that is missing, and when you compare that to what we've discussed in the very basic cognitive processes, list of cognitive processes, there's one thing that is, of course, memory is missing, but there is another important system that is missing here, and that's attention. Attention is that uh, one important aspect of perception that never received its due. It's a very important aspect of attention. In fact, it is that process that lies between sensation and perception, and once the information is captured by a sense organ, before you can perceive it, you need to be able to select what is perceived, select what you have captured. The reason is that your sense organs have captured, meaning you, for example, vision, your photoreceptors have captured a lot more information than your brain can perceive. So, a selection process is you focus on a part of this sensory information that is in your sense organs that becomes your proximal stimulus. Make sense? The entire thing is proximal stimulus, but only a portion of it gets selected through a process called attention. And this selected information goes to your brain for interpretation, which is perception recognition. Eventually, you'll take action. So, um, we'll talk about attention in this unit. And what is attention? Well, you can think of attention as as a mechanism of selectively or selecting sensory information for further processing. Okay? Because you cannot perceive everything that is being captured by your sense organs. I'll give you an example. So if you look straight, right, whatever kind of you can see, right, that's called your visual field. And there is a one-on-one correspondence between the every point in the visual field and on your retina, so that everything that is in the visual field is captured. Now, and in another video, I'll talk about how much information, what are the experiments that led to discover this, is that out of this, 76% of information stays in your sensory memory for um, long enough for your attentional system to kick in and select a part of it. And this selected part alone will go to uh, further processing for interpretation, which is perception. So it is important to understand that attention has both selective processes that you are consciously aware of, and there are also selective processes that you're not consciously aware of. And there are selective processes that are directly related to your focus, meaning that if you're looking at something directly, right, for instance, if I'm looking at this particular remote, right, my direct attention and my gaze are on the same thing, right? You can also be attending indirectly to an object by focusing not directly at the object, but indirectly. So attention has multiple meanings to it, and it's important to understand it. For instance, you can talk about you can attend to different things, or you can attend to different locations. You can attend to things directly. You can attend to things indirectly. You call that overt attention versus covert attention. Overt attention occurs when your eyes and where you're focusing are in the same object. Covert attention occurs um, when your attention shifts without shifting your gaze, meaning that you can pay attention to this area without actually looking at it. right? So that is covert attention. Now, attentional research involves different aspects. There's a lot of research in attention that is done in auditory messaging, and there is dichotic listening tasks by experimenters, and we'll talk about those and their mechanisms. Sherry's experiments of dichotic listening tasks, right? And there are also Posner's experiments of spotlight attention, right? So let's talk about dichotic listening task. Typically, in a dichotic listening task, participants would be asked even two tasks. That's what's called dichotic listening task. Dichotic means two, listening means listening. They'll be listening to two different things. In fact, they'll listen to two different things in 2 different years. And their task would be, one would be a primary task, and the other would be, what do you say, a secondary task. So uh, participants would be asked to pay attention to selectively attend to the information presented in one ear, right? For instance, the information that is presented to the left ear in this picture is that the yellow dog chased, right? And that individual need to focus on that ear and repeat that information. This process called shadowing. So the primary task is shadowing, and the secondary task is to avoid the information presented to the other ear. The meaning of life is the information that is presented to the other ear. And the interesting thing is that Sherry and his colleagues, they try to measure if if we do process information that is presented to the unattended ear or not. Meaning that one example I would like to give to kind of understand in the real sense what this means is, just imagine you have, I'm going to say it slowly, okay? uh, just imagine you have Alexa at home, and um, now here's a question. Do you think, I'll use the word A, I just want to say the name. Do you think A would be listening to me right now? You may think no. But would it recognize her name A when I say Alexa if Alexa was not paying attention to me all along? You heard that? It paused for a second. So the point I'm trying to make is that the system need to process both information that you select and also deselect it, at least till you make the selection. Otherwise, you won't know which one to select and which one not to select, right? So the question that dichotic listening task of Sherry was trying to address was, to what extent do we even process unattended information, or we just make a selection? Like another visual example would be if there is a bunch of pennies and there are quarters, and if you're asked to get the quarter from the penny, it's easy, right? And the question is, do you directly go to the quarter, or do you process both quarters and pennies at a level that is sufficient for you to select what you want? So that is the question. And the selection, um, uh, what Sherry found was that the people were actually good at shadowing, meaning that they were able to avoid information they were not supposed to pay attention to. They were able to do the shadowing, repeat the information. It was beautiful. What they also found was that when participants were asked questions about information presented to the unattended ear, which is the information they're supposed to ignore, they had no memory of it. That's very good. But point is, they had some idea about what that information was. Like participants were able to identify whether it was a male voice or female voice. Participants were able to identify whether it was a high pitch or low pitch, or if it was a English language or a different language. So broader features of the information was identified, meaning that the processing of unattended ear was done to some extent necessary for them to discriminate between these two stimuli. So that's the idea. The question, do we attend and do we process unattended information? Of course we do. Otherwise, you won't be able to select what you want to attend to without actually knowing what you don't want to attend to. So that's why attention involves two things: attending to and ignoring or deselecting. So attention is both the process of selecting and deselecting. And the deselection and selection only happens when you process both because otherwise you don't know which one to select or not, if not for processing the entire information. So that's the idea. And the first model proposed based on this, again, there'll be another video which talks about only these things in detail, is a Broadbent's model. And this Broadbent's model talks about a filter. So just imagine if you have a filter, just like if you have like a filter, and let's say you have tea leaves, I don't know how, tea leaves, right? And you pour hot water, what comes out are not the tea leaves, but the smaller particles that can pass through the filter, which comes out as the tea flavor, color, taste, whatever you want to say. But the actual bigger parts, they stay here. So that is the filter process. So, so according to Broadbent, attention is like a filtering process where you are processing everything at a level that is sufficient for you to select what you want. Here, I want to select the taste and the color. That's what passes through because it is processed based on the size of the particles. So that's the idea. And again, there are other theories of selective attention that the video talks about, which you can watch, and that video will follow this one. I'll stop here to take a break.